A traditional drinking vessel typically used for beer, a tankard often has a hinged lid you raise and lower with a thumb lever. Dating back to 15th century England, they were initially made of wood, then silver or pewter. The tradition of handcrafting pewter tankards continues today. This manufacturer makes pewter tankards in many styles, one of which has the legend of the King's shilling engraved on it, and a reproduction of a shilling coin from 1816 encased in the glass bottom. Every step is done by hand, beginning with a sheet of pewter that's just more than a millimeter thick. Using a punch press, they cut it into the shape required to form the tankard's body. Next, they place the pewter on a copper plate, which has on it, in raised lettering, the story of the King's shilling. They feed this in between two rollers, which press the lettering into the pewter. A soft metal, pewter is composed mostly of tin, along with smaller quantities of two other metals, antimony and copper. Next, a metalsmith takes over. He manually bends the pewter into the cylindrical shape of the tankard's body. He brushes on flux, a chemical which helps molten metal flow more easily. Then, with a soldering tool, he fuses the edges of the body with pure tin solder. Traditionally, both the pewter and solder contained lead, but today, both are lead-free. Next, the metalsmith slides the cylinder onto a steel form and hammers the solder seam flat, rendering it virtually invisible. Now, a specialized tradesman known as a pewter spinner slips the body onto a lathe. As the lathe rotates, he uses a series of tools to smooth the surface, trim excess off the top and bottom, and turn the top edge over to form a lip. Next, a buffer uses pumice and a cloth buffing wheel to remove imperfections and make the surface silky smooth. Meanwhile, in the casting department, they heat solid pewter to 240 degrees Celsius, then carefully pour the now molten metal into a rubber mold. Inside are several cavities for shillings and large rings. After about 30 seconds, the pewter solidifies and the parts can come out. To make the tankard's handle, the casters pour molten pewter into a steel mold, then tilt the mold in all directions to spread the rapidly setting metal all along the wall of the cavity. This makes the handle hollow and therefore lightweight. They grind the ends on an abrasive belt, so the handle will fit flush against the tankard body. Another worker, meanwhile, assembles the tankard's glass base, a glass disc, a shilling, a ring, then a second glass disc. The ring acts as a spacer, creating enough of a gap between the glass discs to allow the coin to slide around. He applies waterproof glue around the perimeter to adhere everything together. Next, he places this shilling sandwich in a pewter base and adheres a second ring to hide the glue. Back to the metalsmith now. He dabs the tankard's body onto a pad impregnated with flux. He then solders together the body and base. Once the parts are attached, a final buffing with a soft felt wheel. Next, the metalsmith dips the handle ends in flux and solders them to the body. To avoid scorching the tankard surface, this time he uses a bismuth and tin solder, which requires a lower temperature to melt. The tankard is now fully constructed. They clean it in a dishwasher. Then they shine it up. First, the polisher does the inside, using a rough grit abrasive compound, producing a matte finish. Then he polishes the outside using a finer grit compound. This produces a contrasting mirror finish. In 18th and 19th century England, a volunteer for army or naval service accepted a shilling as a bonus upon signing up. However, volunteers were in short supply, so recruiters are said to have visited pubs and slipped shillings into the pewter tankards of inebriated men who, upon their last sip, discovered they'd been duped into serving. It may well be a myth, but it still makes a darn good story to share over a pint.